Hey guys, today we're going to talk about how our relationship with God influences our relationship with others. Now, there are two parts to that point, and the first part being our relationship with God. And we're going to see in our lesson today that our relationship with God determines our relationship with others. You can't have a good relationship with others and not have a good relationship with God. Because we're sinners, we struggle with following simple instructions, following rules, laws. We inherited this from the first sinners, Adam and Eve. And our sin is the reason for God's law. God gave the Israelites the Ten Commandments. That's the first time God gives His law to us as humans. He gives it to the Israelites as a way to live that is pleasing unto Him. It's a set of laws that will set them apart from other nations around them, and will align them and us with Him. But at the same time, the Ten Commandments also show us that we can't obey His law in our own strength. But if we repent of our sin and trust in Jesus, the law goes from being our enemy to our friend. So we're going to open up to our scripture, which is in Exodus 19, verses 3 through 6. Then Moses climbed the mountain to appear before God. The Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "Give these instructions to the family of Jacob. Announce it to the descendants of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you will obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples on earth. For all the earth belongs to me, and you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. This is the message you must give to the people of Israel." And now I'm going to go to chapter 20 to read the Ten Commandments. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's." So our relationship with God is the most important thing. But as I've said to you guys before, we are called to live in community. And part of living in community, which is what God was setting up for the Israelites. But the type of community that He wanted to set up for them was a community that reflected His nature, His characteristics. God delivered His people out of bondage in Egypt and revealed to them the power and provided for them their needs, despite their lack of faith and constant complaining. Although the Israelites didn't see it, as we know from the story, God was being gracious to them, and His grace abounded. His grace was abundant in all His dealings with the Israelites throughout their time in the wilderness. In fact, God giving them the Ten Commandments was another act of grace towards the Israelites. And I know us as children, everyone, someone's child, it's hard to see our parents' rules as good things. Not as good things, but as things that are for our good. Oftentimes we see them as hindrances, like they're trying to keep us from something. But as you grow older, you begin to understand the bigger picture of what your parents' rules were meant for. You begin to see how their rules are for your good, born out of love for you. So, some rules that I've come to appreciate more and respect that my parents set for me was, it wasn't necessarily a rule. Well, it was a rule, but if one of us were to go somewhere, then we weren't to separate from each other, and not like we're all just supposed to stay in the same place as we are now. But if I was gonna go to high school class, then Zechariah was gonna come with me. You guys know Zechariah is my younger brother. Or if I was gonna go to help out, like you guys saw, like when we were at Madness, I was going to help out Madness, so I brought my brother. And I appreciate how my parents raised us that way, in that it gave us all the sense of one of our own community, our family community, and it made us closer together, just as siblings. And so now it's something that is something that we do just out of habit. So I'm about to go to the store. Well, come on, I'm gonna take my brother with me, because there was no real reason for us to separate other than I was going one place. There was no reason he couldn't come, or that there was anything that they couldn't do. So they were always included. I've really appreciated that, as I've also been on the receiving end as a younger brother, because I have older brothers as well. Of when they go to do something, they'll consider us, even though most of them are out of the house, they still come back here. Or my sister will come, and she's about to go with her kids. They're about to go to the park, so she'll stop by and see if we want to go with them, or if we can come too. And it's just that sort of camaraderie and relationship that a lot of families simply don't have, but it's something that I appreciate my parents instilling in us. God's law is the same. We also see that God's law is the same way. Obviously, not necessarily the same, but God's laws are for our good. God gave the law to the Israelites as a gift of grace. It was for their own good, whether they realized that or not. The Israelites had been captive in Egypt for, I believe it was 400 years, and suddenly they were free. In the wilderness, they were their own nation, but they had no laws, and as we learned last week, they were just starting to set up a way of organizing themselves, where we see Moses when we were talking last week about Moses as the leader. So God stepped down to show his people how they should live. And God wanted his people to live differently from the surrounding nations. Many times I think it's over 600 or some laws that God gives the Israelites in the Old Testament, just from the first few books. And most of them are all intended to separate them from the nations that Israel finds themselves around. And God wants this separation because the Israelites were his chosen people, and we, as Christ followers of his Son, that also extends to us as people who are to be set apart, to be lights around the world. But we're supposed to be different than everyone else. People should be able to look at us and see that there's something different about us. People should be. I look at you guys compared to other kids that I know and have been around, and see that I can tell some you guys they're better. There are more godlike characteristics in you guys than others, and I don't want you guys to take that for granted or necessarily become prideful in that, because while we may practice Christian morality, whether what I mean by that is whether we are just good people, that doesn't necessarily mean you're better than everybody. Whether that means I conduct myself well, that makes me no less a sinner than anyone else. God set the Israelites apart because he wanted them he says many times in the Bible that he wanted others to look onto the Israelites and want to be a part of what was going on, which is what the church's responsibility is in the world today. We understand that God's law is for our good, telling us how to live, but we also understand it tells us more than that. Part of God's law demonstrates to us who God is. So throughout this first part of the Bible, up until this point, the Israelites may have gathered, but weren't completely sure about certain characteristics of God. But his law definitely gives us special revelation into who he is. For instance, what verses in chapter 19, one of the first things when he's giving them the laws, he says that he is a jealous God. Well, we didn't know that, but like the Israelites, and we didn't know that prior to, but now we know that God is a jealous God. He doesn't like for his creation to worship something other than him. God giving the law is God revealing himself directly to his people through his word. God has no rival, and he calls us as his people to demonstrate our loyalty, giving no one else or nothing else greater precedence than him. And we see that in the Ten Commandments. That's the commandment that says, "Thou shalt not worship any other god but me," and also where it tells us not to have idols. And part of not having idols, anything, as it says, it can be you can idolize a person, and you can make a person an idol, or you can make a thing an idol. One of the big things that people tend to worship as an idol is money. But I want to share with you guys as something that many Christians struggle with, myself included, and I'm not sure if you guys have, but I'm sure it will certainly be something you do as well, is idolizing your good works. Or making your good works an idol, I'm sorry. Because I could take this situation, this position that I've been put in to teach to you guys, and I could make an idol out of it. Basically worshiping and putting before God my own strength and how I conduct myself, and how I'm prideful and conceited in the fact that this is what I do. This is something that I do well, and this happens because of me. And oftentimes Christians find themselves in places of making their good works an idol, where it's not reflected. Is the main point of what we're doing. We end up turning it on us instead of towards God. We're not giving glory we're glorifying ourselves as opposed to glorifying God. And giving God the place he rightly deserves in our affections is necessary for every action and thought and relationship that we have. The second commandment amplifies the first. In our sin, we who are made in God's image turn around and try to make him into ours. We fashion idols and put our trust in them, hoping that they will make us significant or bring us salvation. And there are various ways these all... Breaking one commandment, I watched a teaching recently, and the speaker was saying, you can never just break one commandment. Because as Christians, we know that, in the Ten Commandments, it says, for instance, that thou shalt not murder. And I believe I talked to you guys about it before, how Jesus then further defined that we can murder someone's soul, or we can murder their character by slandering them, or speaking ill, lying about someone, or cursing them, just speaking badly or wrong about someone else. That if you do that, then you've murdered someone with your words. And so it's hard to break one commandment. You can never just break one commandment. Because say I lie about someone and attempt to destroy their character, well then I've lied, and I've committed murder. And the reason that I was so apt to destroy them was because I coveted what they had, their status, or their their status or their position, and I'm not honoring my mother and father by acting in such a way. And I'm most likely making an idol out of myself, and putting my trust in what I can do. And so that's may have been a little fast, but that's 5 commandments right there. That's 5 of the 10 commandments that you've broken. And so one leads to another, is what I'm trying to get you guys to understand. But as I said before, is the law also serves as not only as a standard. It doesn't only show us who God is or how we can live with Him. It also demonstrates to us, it's a perfect example to us that we can't obey all the 10 commandments just in and of ourselves. I can wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to obey every commandment today. I'm going to be a good person. I'm not going to sin. But the fact of the matter is that that's not going to happen. And that's because I'm trying to do it with me. It's just going to be me. I'm going to use my strength. It's going to be my power. By my willpower, I'm going to do this. I'm going to live up to God. But we can't do that as humans. We need God's strength, and we need His forgiveness for when we do fall short of these things. And that's where Jesus comes in. This is why God was careful to establish the context for His law, His love. You have to notice that in the first section of Scripture that I read, God instructed Moses to tell the people, before He gave them the 10 Commandments, He was to remind them about how God had delivered them and carried them and had protected them all throughout them being in Egypt and now in the wilderness. This is God's way of telling His people that He loves us. Like, look at how much I love you and I care for you, and this is why I've done it. You see, we've seen His love, and we've experienced, and with that same love, He gives us His law. And another thing that this law, that God giving the Israelites and us His law, shows, is that He's a personal God. He's not a far off God as He's not a far off, separated, like distance God. Like, I'm better than a creator who's better than a creation. While God is, He still loves us and knows us and cares to know about us personally. Because if God didn't care personally about having a relationship with us or about who we were, then there would be no reason for Him to give us His law. He gave us His law, and He gave us Jesus because He wants to know us. He wants us to know that we know. He wants us to know that that He loves us and that He cares for us. He wants for us to be with Him in paradise because He wants He's a creator who wants His creation to love Him. But the problem with us is that we're sinners, and oftentimes we don't love God quite simply. Whether that's in the correct way, because if we try to do things in our own way, in our own strength, that's only going to lead us further into sin. Or we just don't try to love Him at all, and that obviously is very bad. That doesn't make any. We're not going to get anywhere doing that. Part of God's law hinges on love, and what that means is that through our love with God as Christians, it is God's love in us that compels us and makes us want to obey Him, to keep His commandments. The motivation for following and obeying God should be and is our love for Him. God loved us enough to give us His law and to teach us how to be, how to act in His eyes. But we still have to make the choice to love God and to love others. The first 4 commandments deal with our relationship with God, and the remaining 6 commandments deal with our relationship with other people. It's our relationship with God that determines the quality and extent of our relationship with others. I'm not going to be able to if I don't have a good relationship with God, I'm not going to have a good standard for relationship with other people. So if the basis, what I mean by that is the basis for our relationship with God, my relationship with God, is love. And so on that foundation is how we continue to build up and move on up to a place, up to how we build a strong relationship with God. And we can then do that on a smaller scale. I say smaller simply because it's human relations and not our godly relations. We can then expose that love and reflect the love of God that He has for us and that we have for Him. That reflection then makes us a beacon, a light the light that the church and us as Christians are supposed to be. It makes us who we're supposed to be, and we have to be on fire for God. We have to love Him. Loving God means that we share in His will, His mission, and God's mission is to bring His creation to Him. And so with that, that's how our relationship with others should be. You guys know that and I hope that I am a demonstration of that to you guys, in a way, and relating to others and having a relationship with God. As a church, we love the people of the world. We are here for the purpose of being a light in the darkness of the world. We are to go into all nations, including our own, and declare the name of God. And this is something we should do out of love and not as a burden. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this message. I hope you guys understand the reason God gave us His law, how we're supposed to act with others, and what is necessary. In that, I hope you guys understand that love is necessary in having a relationship with God. It should be the basis. God first loved us, but it's a choice to love Him and to live in His will. So that's it. Thank you guys for coming again to watch, and I really enjoyed doing this with you guys. It's been a fun time. I'm not sure if we have a lesson next week. Probably not, as it's Easter. So I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Have a happy Easter. Happy birthday to James, Mr. H, and my sister as well, Kalea. She had her birthday just this Thursday. So happy birthday to all you guys. And I'll see you guys later.